Arachnophobia, the fear of spiders, is one of the most common phobias in the world, or so the internet tells me. So tell me how, when I was a boy, I was so overwhelmingly overtaken by that same phobia for a creature that I'm not even convinced was a spider. It was a dreary afternoon. I was too bored to even lay in my bed that day, so only the cold attic floor that supported my bedroom could provide me a fraction of entertainment. I was grounded from TV and anything else considered fun for the remainder of the week. I don't remember why, and as far as I can tell, it didn't matter. All I remember was the welcoming jolt of terror when a ball of snow banged against my window. I lurched up to look, but whoever had thrown the snowball had only left a messy trail of boot prints behind. I rolled my eyes and almost went back to laying on the floor when a piece of sopping wet paper caught my eye. I wrenched the window open with an annoying screech to paw at the snowball still stuck to my glass. In the depths of its core was a wet note written in purple ink that stained blue on my fingers. It read, "Mr. Kaminsky's barn, 8 p.m. Don't be late. Don't be scared." Mr. Kaminsky was an old literature teacher at our local middle school. He had recently passed this year from a heart attack or stroke or something equally horrible. Some said it was from old age, others said something in or around his house had caused it. I honestly didn't care either way. My neighbor Jess, however, was annoyingly curious. She had so many theories revolving around the mysteries of that man's property. Rats with bat wings, a living basement with sharp teeth, ghosts, ghouls, specters, the list went on. I had to listen to her ramble about it for hours on end whenever we rode the bus back from school. Since they were only theories, it didn't bother me much, until she started sneaking into the old man's house for evidence. She had never found anything, and only I knew about it. She had invited me to join her every time, but I always used homework as an excuse not to join her. Today was the weekend. I had no excuse. And if I'm honest, the black smudge of a doodle in the corner of the note made me curious enough to not need one. The doodle was of a fluffy black ball with legs. It would have been a spider if it had a head, but it was just the one fuzzy black sphere. Jess wasn't the kind to doodle for fun. She was the kind that doodled for emphasis. Whatever this doodle was, it was something that she had seen. Mr. Kaminsky's old farmhouse was a 10-minute bike ride away from my house. After dinner, I had holed myself up in my room again and waited until my mom had turned on the TV, so I could slide out the window and almost break my neck slipping off the roof. The bike ride there was cold and dark, but the roads had been shoveled that morning, so it wasn't too terribly snow-ridden. My heavy coat kept me warm, but my shoes weren't made for winter, so my toes were going numb. All memories of my toes faded, however, when the barn came into view. It was a dull gray block of splinters that stained the deep contrast of both the snow and the night sky. A sad reminder of just how quiet it was here. A reminder that no one was there. It was a classic barn shape with a curved roof, large sliding doors, and a steeple. Drooping hay peeked out of the loft and a few rotted holes between warped boards that held the barn together. It was surrounded by ankle-high snow. A rope dangled from the old crane that was used to pull bales into the loft. I would have been tempted to swing on it had it looked stable. It most certainly was not stable. Which is probably why I tossed my bike aside when I saw Jess swinging from it, making the crane bow and desperately try to pull away from the screws holding it into wooden splinters. "You're going to be sued for property damage," I called, grabbing the rope and halting her swaying. "The rope is fine, see? It's not even frayed," Jess laughed. She fell back to the ground and lightly punched my shoulder. "It's not the rope I'm worried about." I pointed up at the crane still sagging from the memory of her weight, but Jess didn't look. "You saw the spider I drew, right?" she asked, gripping the barn door and heaving it open with a piercing squeal. I sighed and nodded. "It's not technically a spider, it only has one body segment. This is why I brought you," she winked at me. "Fancy nerd stuff might just help me pin these buggers down." I rolled my eyes and followed her inside. The inside of the barn was somehow both dry and humid at the same time. My throat was parched as soon as we walked in, followed by a light sheen of sweat that tickled my brow. The air was stuffy and old, almost as old as the hay that covered every surface of the barn's floor and hung from its walls. Some even swung from the rafters thanks to the sudden breeze that came in from the door. The hay buried what were once horse and livestock stalls on either side of the barn, their walls only coming up to my chest. The wooden beams that held this place upright were just as gray and splintered as the boards that covered the outside, but were much thicker and tall enough to disappear into the shadows of the roof, which I couldn't believe was there till I saw the stars peeking out of a gaping hole in the back left corner. Needless to say, it was miserable. Jess loved it. "This is so perfect," she quietly cheered. She dug into one of her cargo pockets and tossed me the smallest flashlight I'd ever seen. "I'll start at this end. You go down to the back and search through that part." I was about to argue that I wanted to stay by the door, but she had already dove headfirst into a pile of hay. With clammy hands and a throat so dry I was close to choking, I waddled through the itchy hay to the back corner where she pointed me towards. I tried my best not to think about what might be in the hay. Diseases, dead mice, maybe an ant colony or two? Nope. Don't think about it, I told myself. The hay made each step springy, like a taut trampoline. I tried to focus on that sensation instead, lightly bouncing myself through the hay and listening to the pleasant wooden thumps. Thump, 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 thunk. The hollow noise echoed through the darkness. An echo of a splinter falling into a deep hole followed lightly after. Jess's head shot out of the hay bale she had been swimming through. What was that? I pointed my dinky light towards the boards I was standing on. A thin layer of hay covered them. Bending down to pick them away, I revealed a well-tarnished and icy handle that was protruded from the floor. I muttered. "It's a door, I think?" Jess threw me aside and yanked at the handle. She groaned at the sudden soreness that seeped into her arms. "It's stuck," she pouted, not letting go of the handle and looking at me sadly. That was her way of saying, "I'm not smart enough to figure out what's wrong. Do something before I start griping." I aimed my light into the gaps around the door and saw a rusted latch that held the door in place. An empty hole that once held the latch in stasis stared up at me like a wide eye trying to warn me of something that I was missing. I was too busy trying to pull the latch away to notice. The rust held the latch firmly, but after a few finger-numbing pulls, it screeched away and Jess threw the trapdoor open, pushing me to the floor. "Thanks," she said, jumping down before even looking inside. The air that erupted from the trapdoor almost knocked me out. It smelled so horrible. I'd never smelled anything like it, so I had no way of referencing what it could be or what had caused it. Through watering eyes, I pulled away from the hay pile I had fallen into, only to stop from the sudden realization of what I was lying on. The hay beneath me had caught most of my fall, yes. So what was that velvety texture underneath my hand right now? I slowly turned my flashlight to where my right hand was resting. Under my fingers was the miserable, wrinkled skin of a black and white spotted animal. It was as cold as the snow outside and felt utterly deflated. I couldn't even be sick by the realization of what it was because it felt so long dead I couldn't even feel sorry for it. "Jess?" I croaked. Jess didn't answer. I aimed the flashlight towards the trapdoor again, but caught another hay pile on the way, seeing a few strands left of a horse's mane and hide, equally deflated. Every pile I saw now was covering some poor body of some poor animal that was now nothing but a cold, shriveled corpse of what it used to be. "Jess!" I called more sternly. "What?" she called back, annoyed. "Everything is dead up here." Yeah, they've been dead for a while. Why do you think that old man threw hay over them?" My limbs felt cold even through my jacket. "Why didn't he bury them?" "I'm not yelling the story at you from down here. You come to me or stop asking questions." I swallowed around the dry lump in my throat and willed my numb feet to move. Somehow, I managed to crawl down the steep stairs in the darkness of that barn's basement and shone my flashlight around the putrid-smelling hole that we had found. The room was made of dug-out earth. Metal shelves lined the edges and protruded out into the main walkway, overflowing with canned food, old electronics, gas canisters, and more that my flashlight couldn't help me make out. If I had been sweating in the barn, this place was making me completely drenched. "Why is it so hot in here?" I breathed, tempted to take off my jacket. "Activity," Jess said, as if that explained it. "So, the bodies?" I pointed upstairs. "He was one guy. How could he bury them all by himself?" Jess had the most vague way of explaining things that only left me with more questions. "So they were dead before he got here?" I asked. "No, they were dead before he got." Jess pointed her flashlight to a tarp in the corner. There's nothing under it, but I recognized the kind of tarp used to cover cadavers. "What do you mean he got? You mean something killed him?" Jess stared at me as if I was the one not making sense. "How do you think those animals died?" I gripped my tiny flashlight like a lifeline. I don't know." "No? Well, would you believe me if that was what killed them?" She pointed her flashlight at an empty glass case in the middle of the room. Her eyebrows shot up as she ran to it. I, being the literal idiot that I was, said, "Nothing? They starved to death?" "No," she growled. "It escaped. How did it escape?" "It?" Something toppled over and shattered behind me. I saw the fragments of glass on the floor along with the metal can, but I couldn't see what had toppled it over. A skitter sent a sudden shiver up my spine. It sounded like the mini legs of a bug, but much denser and deeper, as if the legs were thicker, stronger. Jess's mouth turned up into an expectant smile as she stared deep into the darkness behind me. "Oh, found it." The shiver in my spine froze as I slowly turned to see what she was smiling at. A fluffy black ball with black and white striped legs stared up at me from the floor. It was only the size of my hand. "Oh." I crouched down to look a little closer. "That's it?" "Yep." Jess stood up and put her hands on her hips. "All this trouble for one little guy." I laughed a little. Of course this was all a prank that Jess was pulling. Those animals were long since dead, and Mr. Kaminsky had been scared by a little spider, or not spider. "What is it?" I asked Jess. She shrugged. "I don't know. I still think it's a spider, like a cold little Arctic spider or something." I shook my head. "Not a spider, but I can see why it'd freak out Mr. Kaminsky enough to kick the bucket." "Oh, he didn't kick it willfully," Jess laughed. "Those little buggers drain the life out of you." "What?" "Yeah, you know how spiders drain the life out of their prey and stuff? Those Arctic spiders do too. All the fuzzy bits aren't fur, they're mouths. I watched them drain the life out of a mouse once." All my limbs became as numb as my feet. I shone my light at Jess's face, making her glare and point her brighter light at me. "Jess," I wheezed, "why are we in here if this thing could kill us?" Jess snorted and waved a hand at me. "It's harmless as long as it's by itself. It's when there's a swarm of them that they do the most damage." My glare would have been able to freeze her faster than the snow outside. "Swarm?" I stuttered. That's when the skittering started. Dozens upon dozens of dense little legs crept up all around us. Whatever light that had been coming through the trapdoor was quickly evaporating. Before my fear could seep even further into my body, Jess snatched my arm and threw me up the stairs and back into the cold of the barn. I felt the knot spider's furry bodies try to grab at me as we kicked the trapdoor closed and threw the latch back in place. Jess picked up a tarnished padlock hidden under the hay. Oh, this was probably important. I snatched it from her and locked it through the hole that had been staring at me before. For a moment, we both heaved a sigh of relief. Until they started squeezing through the gaps. It was just a few tufts of fur that appeared first. Then the entire body of a knot spider squeezed and contorted till it popped out, landing on all 8 of its stripy legs. Jess and I scrambled back as more and more of the spiders popped out and contorted through the thin trapdoor gaps. "How are they doing that?" I gasped, pinning myself against a hay pile. For the first time in my life, I heard Jess laugh nervously. I guess they're just, squishy?" The spiders crawled up the walls, blocking and blotting out any semblance of color left in the barn. The holes in the walls that left precious moonlight in were plugged up, the splintery wood was overtaken, and even the hay piles were moving with the wave of fuzzy bodies. I turned to sprint for the door, but there was no door, only a wall of knot spiders, the white in their legs occasionally breaking the pure black that overtook the rest of the room. Jess gripped my arm tight enough to bruise later and dragged me up the steep ladder into the loft. I started pulling away from her, panicking. You're gonna get us trapped in... She grabbed my face and squeezed it till it was turned towards the loft window. It was open. She gave me a hard shove and yelled at me to keep running. I heard her feet stomping on the rotting wood behind me. The ever-present skittering overtook every sense of my body, fueling me with pure adrenaline that persisted even when I had slipped on the hay and fallen to the loft floor. I felt a warmth seep through my cheek, but couldn't find out what it was before Jess had scooped me up and thrown me out the window. My limbs flailed everywhere till my fingers brushed against the rope swaying in the breeze. I grasped at it with every part of me that I could and swung far out into the open air that I could breathe so much easier than the barn air that was fresh and not full of knot spiders and deflated barn animals, air that was interrupted by a sudden jerk that threw me into the side of the barn. The bruise that Jess had given me before grew 10 times bigger and forced me to release the rope, sending me down into the snow below. Surprisingly, the barn had hurt more than the ground. I stared up at the rope dangling above me and saw Jess beaming down at me from the top. She started. A loud crack interrupted her mid-celebration. The crane that had been clinging to the side of the barn buckled. A sudden jolt made Jess's smile disappear. Then an even louder crack sent both her and the crane towards me. I dove away and covered my head from the splinters and old screws raining down. The impact shook the ground hard. After a few breaths, I uncovered my head to look. The crane was buried deep into the snow and dirt. Just underneath its splintering remnants was Jess. Her eyes rolled in her head, but she blearily made eye contact with me. Her smile was the best thing I had seen all day. I grabbed her under her shoulders and started pulling her away from the crane when the first spider fell. We both screamed when the second one landed on Jess's chest. She punched it into the barn door and painfully yelled as she stood up to limp away. Despite the raining spiders falling on our heads, I still threw her arm over my shoulder and dragged her away back to my bike. We threw and kicked knot spiders aside the whole way. I couldn't help but notice that Jess was leaning on me more and more heavily the further we got. Jess, I need you to do some of the walking here. Once we had gotten to my bike, the knot spiders had been lost in the snow. I could see some of them still trying to hop towards us, but they quietly gave up and started creeping back to the barn. I heaved under Jess's weight. Okay, Jess, you have to... I went to shift her weight onto the back of my bike, but she tumbled to the ground. Jess! It had taken me this long to see the single spider latched onto her leg. I kicked it away and yelled at it. It left no bite marks, no bruise, only a wrinkled patch of skin that I wrapped in my jacket. Covering it wouldn't help with anything, I knew that, but not seeing that patch helped ease my mind if only a little. I couldn't pedal us both back to town, so I was forced to sit with Jess's unconscious body till a car had passed us. I was able to wave it down and explained as much as I could. The man that had stopped seemed to only care about the crane part and helped me load Jess into the back seat to drive her to the hospital. I tried explaining everything to the doctors and nurses there as well, but they just dabbed something that stung against my cheek and explained something called post-traumatic stress that didn't make any sense to me. My mom met me there and held me like I was a little kid again, in between scolding me. Jess and I didn't see much of each other after that. I was no longer allowed to hang out with her, and she didn't remember most of what happened anyway. When I had asked her about it before, she would just laugh and say, "You mean when I pulled that crane on top of us?" She didn't remember the knot spiders or the life they had drained from her leg. I could still see the wrinkled spot where it had gotten her, but never had the heart to remind her of what had caused it. It was better if only one of us lived with those nightmares. So remember, if ever you feel scared of those 8-legged arachnids out there in the world, take it from me and know that they could be much worse.